So I wanted to talk a little bit about the VA assumption loan, what that is exactly, what does that look like, what are some of the important things to know. Um, so basically, a VA assumption loan it allows a VA loan to be assumed by another buyer, right? Doesn't have to be a service member, but we'll talk more about what that looks like if it's not. It basically just allows the loan to be assumed. Therefore, that rate is assumed. And it's kind of popular right now, or there's a lot of questions around it right now. Interest rates are a little bit higher than they were back in 2020, even 2021. So there's a lot of low interest rates out there that are assumable. So it's really something that buyers are, asking questions about. So I wanted to discuss some of the important things to know um, about that. So I work with a lot of military families. I have also helped do a couple of assumption loans, both of which were very different. And most of that was because of the servicing lender. So one of them closed in 30 days, one of them closed in 90 days. So one of the things to ask is important to know what the timeframes are for that specific servicer. So some, I think 90 days is what they say the average is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is guaranteed. So it's important to ask that servicer, when you're going through the process of, on average, what is your closing time frame for an assumable loan? That way the buyer knows what that looks like. The seller is aware of what that looks like, because that could be 3 months of additional payments that the seller is going to have to make that they weren't aware that they were going to have to make. Also, something to keep in mind is the seller needs to be current on their mortgage. They cannot be in deferment, forbearance. They can't be late on mortgage payments. It needs to be current and up to date in order for that buyer to do the assumption. So, other things to keep in mind are, does that lender have any overlays? Has that lender added any other requirements, not necessarily required by the VA, onto that assumption? Are there any restrictions? Can anybody assume the loan? Because according to VA standards, anybody can. But the lender may have added, or that servicer may have added additional overlays. So that's going to be important to confirm right before moving forward and getting so far into the process that you've kind of wasted the time of both the buyer and the seller. Another thing to keep in mind is there any equity? So if the seller is selling the home for $300,000, but their loan is for $250,000, just as an example, they have $50,000 worth of equity. They're going to expect the buyer to pay them that $50,000. And that will need to come from either a second mortgage, which in Texas, due to the laws here, it's pretty challenging to do that, or to find a lender that will do that. They can, take out 401k, a savings plan, a gift from a family member, maybe a personal loan. There's other ways to do it, but you need to see what that looks like from the beginning so that the buyer understands and therefore can set themselves up for success knowing what that looks like. So that's important to know about equity. Some of the other things are, if it's a non-service member assuming the loan, what does that mean? So if the buyer is non-service member, that means they don't have access to the VA loan. They can still assume, as long as the lender doesn't have any restrictions, they can still assume that loan. However, the entitlement, or the portion that they are assuming, does not get restored when the loan goes through. Meaning, if that buyer were to not pay, they were to default, whatever that portion is now no longer available to that service member. So if they default on $200,000, the service member no longer has the $200,000, which is a big deal. And really to me, it's risky, right? Because you never know what could happen. So I don't usually advise my clients, or I strongly discourage it and let them know exact details of everything so that they can make the decision, because I think that's really important to be aware of. So important to know if the, who's gonna, where the buyer's coming from, that sort of thing. If it is a service member, they will basically assume and it will get replaced. So the 250 that they're assuming will then get restored with their 250. They do, however, have to have the full amount. So if they own, we'll say, 3 other homes, and they maybe don't have quite the $250,000 to do the full assumption, then they cannot do that. It will not get fully restored, right? Because there's a shortage. And you can't make that up with the down payment. The VA does not allow that. So important to know what your entitlement remaining is if you are a service member looking to assume a VA loan. Another thing is super important to make sure that the release of liability is completed once everything goes through, so that servicer then releases the service member from the loan. So it doesn't come up down the road that they're still attached to this loan. It's fully, release of liability has been completed. Important to double check on that. I would think that a lot of lenders would do it just because it makes sense as part of the process. But apparently that's not the case. So something just to double check on when you're going through the process that has been done. And in a nutshell, those are the main talking points regarding the VA assumption loan. I'm always here to answer any questions that anybody has on what that looks like. Always love to help. And again, I'm with Keller Williams in El Paso, Texas, servicing Fort Bliss. Would love to earn your business if you're looking to buy or sell, or you know of anybody looking to buy or sell in the area. Thanks so much and have a great day.